Well, it's a little bit early, but why not, right? I always go over anyway, so I'll take the 2 minutes. One of the things that you either are fortunate or unfortunate enough to get because of the way Darrell scheduled the last classes, all 4 of us who have been teaching this time have had a class right here in a row. So I get to be the last and 4th person to offer my thanks for our notice. I went back and watched the last 4 classes, and all 3 of my previous teachers spent some time thanking the class for being in attendance. And so I will follow suit with that. Thank you so much for your comments this time. This has been particularly meaningful for me this time. Sam, this is his first time teaching an adult class, and so being able to be part of that with him was great for me, and I know that he's grown a lot, as he mentioned in his final class. You just learn so much more when you're prepping to teach, and you have to be ready to answer people's questions than you do even when you're just studying for yourself there. So thank you all for that. And I'll give a little bit of a commercial for my next class in just a minute here when we get going. So obviously, just because I'm a creature of habit, the last class here in our schedule, if we've been looking at following along the timeline, where are we at right now? Well, you'll see I put that yellow bar up there. We are following actually after the end of Judah. The last few verses of Kings and the last few verses of Chronicles have to deal with what happens after Jerusalem falls. And so that's really what I'm set to cover today. Not very many verses, so we're going to talk about a few other things. And while this is up here, just as a commercial for my next class, well, the class that I'm teaching next time will be upstairs, is I have been given the assignment to teach these 6 prophets: Amos, Hosea, Micah, Joel, Obadiah, and Jonah. So 6 minor prophets that happened during the Assyrian period here, we are going to cover in the next time upstairs in one of the classrooms. I forget which one. One of the ones on the right. Doesn't matter. And I'll be honest with you, there's going to be a lot of special topics discussed in that class. In those 6 books, there are 37 chapters, and we have 32 classes. So if you have at all studied those books, you will realize that is a challenge, even for me, and I can talk a lot, to fill those classes with that. So we're going to have some special topics in there about how those chapters are quoted in those prophets are quoted in the New Testament. We'll have maybe 1, possibly even 2 classes on the history of Assyria and how they interact and how we see actually Israel and Judah represented historically during this time period. We may have some of those, some of which we've covered in here. So if you've been in this class, that will tell the exact same story that we've talked about here, but from the view of the prophets and the book of the prophets. So that was what we'll be talking about next time upstairs. Just as a quick review then, we are here wrapping up the last rulers of Judah here. So the last couple classes we've talked about this, that really these are the last rulers here. Josiah comes in, the last good king of Israel, one of the best kings of Israel. As Darrell noticed, he's way on the right of his chart, which, by the way, I wasn't here on Wednesday, so I couldn't tell how many of you were really digging that. Well, I was geeking out like crazy on Darrell's statistics because him and I are both data guys, and I love it whenever people do that because it kind of combines my spiritual life with my secular life, which doesn't get to happen like that, where we have those kind of skills used that often there. But Josiah being that last king, and then his 4 descendants there, 3 of his sons, and then 1 of his grandchildren are going to be the kings there. So of course, Jehoahaz is only king for 3 months. He was one of the sons of Josiah. Then his son Jehoiakim becomes king. He reigns for 11 years, but he's bad. And when Jehoiakim is taken down. His son Jehoiachin is put in place, but he only lasts 3 months. And then Zedekiah, who is also a son of Josiah, is going to come in and finish up the reign here. And so Zedekiah, the last king, just as a little bit of review of what Darrell covered here, he was a son of Josiah, but in reality, he was more like a governor than a king. Why is that? Who installed him as ruler? Was it the people of Judah? Did they recognize, hey, we're no longer going to have, now that Jehoiachin is gone and his son Jehoiakim has been killed, we're going to go back to another son of Josiah, and that's going to be our king. Did the people of Judah choose him? No. Who chose him? Actually, Nebuchadnezzar chose him, right? So he's installed in power by Nebuchadnezzar, and his Jehoiachin is now held prisoner in Babylon. And the idea here is that we're going to take that guy who was king, we're going to hold him prisoner, install his uncle as king here again. What's the whole purpose of taking captives? What is that supposed to do? Kind of guarantees obedience, right? Or guarantees that you're going to behave. Because if you don't behave, what can happen to whoever's taken captive? He's going to get killed, right? Okay. So really, this was supposed to keep Judah in check, but it doesn't really work, okay? So Zedekiah was king in Judah. He did evil, what was in the sight of the Lord. He did not humble himself, it says. He thought he could rebel against Babylon. And was that a good idea? No, big mistake here, okay? So then we see the fall of Judah. He actually angers Babylon enough that Nebuchadnezzar is going to come back here, and so we see the fall of Judah. And all the officers and the priests and the people likewise were exceedingly unfaithful, following all the abominations of the nations, and they polluted the house of the Lord that he had made holy in Jerusalem. The Lord, the God their fathers, sent persistently to them by his messengers, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they kept mocking the messengers of God, despising his words, and scoffing at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord rose against his people, until there was no remedy. Drew talked a little bit about this on Wednesday, but to me, in all of the Old Testament, there is no more discouraging, no more sad statement here than this idea that things had gotten so bad that even God finally says, what's the only solution here? There's just no fixing this. We have to do what? We have to start over, right? We have to wipe it out and start over. And that's what a lot of the prophets that we're going to cover next time, but more specifically even Jeremiah, really goes over this idea that God is going to get to a point where the only thing he's going to want to do is to start over. And he's not going to destroy the land by water anymore like he did before. So now he's going to destroy it by fire, which is the fire of who? Fire of Babylon. It's going to come in, and they are going to literally wipe the slate clean so things can start over here. And that's exactly what happens. God gets to that point where he says, there's no fixing this. And so we see, therefore he brought up against them the king of the Chaldeans, who killed their young men with the sword and the house of their sanctuary. And he had no compassion on young man or virgin, old man or aged. He gave them all into his hands. Darrell talked pretty eloquently on Wednesday about the siege of Jerusalem and just how terrible it was. Lasted just short of 2 years. Famine was absolutely terrible. He read the passage where it talks about, even women eating their own children just to survive here. The leaders of the city, they try to make an escape, but they end up getting captured. And then nearly everybody, almost 100% of the people, were taken into captivity. And the rest of the people who were left in the city and the deserters who had deserted to the king of Babylon, together with the rest of the multitude, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried into exile. But the captain of the guard left some of the poorest of the land to be vine dressers and plowmen. So now we see them taken into captivity, And so, of course, we're going from Jerusalem over to Babylon, and we can't go straight across. Why? The desert, that's right. Darrell mentioned that really only the Bedouin are going to be the ones who are going to even try that. So they have to go over that Fertile Crescent. They go overland in a pretty terrible journey, and then they are going to go to Babylon, and we are told that they are placed right at the river Kibar here is where they're going to live. We have some fairly good records of this outside of the Bible here. So here is an image of that was put into a clay motif that was found that is part of the record of Nebuchadnezzar capturing Jerusalem and taking them in. So this is what we see on the wall there with the cuneiform writing underneath it there. And then in the Babylonian Chronicles, we find the story where it says, in the second day of the month of Adar, which we would call the 16th of March, he conquered the city and took the king prisoner. We know that was King Jehoiachin. Wait a minute. I'm on the wrong slide, sorry. I'm reading my next coming up. In the 7th month of Nebuchadnezzar, 599, which we know is 599 BC, in the month of Chislev, which is November, December, the king of Babylon assembled his army, and after he had invaded the land of Hatti, which is what they called Syria, we call it Palestine today, he laid siege to the city of Judah, and on the second day of the month of Adar, he conquered the city and took the king prisoner. He installed in his place a king, which we know was Zedekiah, of his own choice, and after he had received rich tribute, he sent them forth to Babylon. So he's really thinking now that they are going to behave, but of course we know Zedekiah didn't, and so that's why he comes and actually wipes out Jerusalem there. So what happens after the fall then? We talked about that Nebuchadnezzar is the guy who comes in, and he's the one who actually lays siege to Jerusalem. They break through the wall after a year and a half to 2 years, almost exactly 2 years really. And then they come in and they just really ransack the city. However, really, did Nebuchadnezzar care a whole lot about Judah? Honestly, not so much. Who was Nebuchadnezzar really more concerned with? That's on the other side of Judah from him. Egypt, right? Remember, for years and years, it had been very beneficial for both Egypt and whatever Mesopotamian empire happened to be in leadership, whether it was Syria, Assyria, or Babylon. It was really beneficial for them to keep kind of this middle ground right in between them, where they didn't really share that border, right? So Judah, they had a vested interest in keeping Judah independent. And was Judah really ever a threat to either one of them? No, okay? At various times, in fact, we see the kings of Judah sometimes trying to partner with Egypt because the Mesopotamian king is messing with them, or sometimes they will go to Syria because Egypt is messing with them, and hopefully they can get some help from there. So there has been this kind of constant back and forth where they've been fighting with the land of Judah just kind of as that buffer zone. But now we know that Nebuchadnezzar really has already defeated the primary army up at the Battle of Carchemish, and he is heading down into Egypt. So after wiping out Judah, he really just kind of takes off, and he leaves this guy, Nebuzaradan, in charge as his kind of guy. I think Darrell said cleanup guy, right? He comes in, and he's the guy who's going to, after the mess, he's going to put things in order. So now he's going to come in, and he's got to leave some kind of leader in place, someone who's going to rule or at least hopefully keep people in order here. That's really the purpose here. So he sets up a governor, a guy named Gedaliah, who is the son of Ahikam, who was a servant to Josiah here. So he's still part of the royal court. However, he is not what? He's not of the house of David, right? And he's not a king. The king of Israel is done. The king of Judah is done. There's going to be no more of that according to the word of Nebuchadnezzar, because he has now taken it over, which in reality is there's no more king because who said so? God did, that's right. because God said so. And so he has sent the king of the Chaldeans here. He has sent Nebuchadnezzar to do this. Now he is also going to rule or be the governor from a city called Mizpah. Why would he have to have his kind of capital, per se, in Mizpah? I thought the capital was Jerusalem. Yeah, it's destroyed, right? It's completely pillaged. It's burned almost to the ground. The gates have been completely ravaged. It's not a suitable place, really, to set up any kind of government of any kind. So he goes up to Mizpah and is going to have his government set up there. Or at least that's where Nebuzaradan decides he's going to set him up. So we know just a very few things about Gedaliah as governor here. He leads with a group of officials. We see there in 2 Chronicles that it is a mix of Jews and Chaldeans that he has with him there as leading. And his real job as a governor, when a foreign state comes in and makes your state vassals and they set up a governor, what's that governor's primary job? Probably two primary jobs. Collect the taxes, right? And make sure the people do what? Just be good. Just behave. Okay? Just don't rebel. Just live it like you're supposed to. And so that's really what Gedaliah does, is he really encourages those few people that are left to just be good. Okay? Live in the land and serve the king of Babylon, and it shall be well with you. Really and truly, one of the things that Babylon did different than Assyria, who was the power before, they were very happy to let you live in your land and to rule that kind of as you wanted, as long as you just did what? What's that? Yeah, pay your tribute, don't rebel, just kind of be good people, and we'll leave you alone. And so that's what Gedaliah really tries to enforce on even the people are left here. Let's finally just have some peace, just behave, serve the king of Babylon, and we'll be okay. However, it doesn't last very long. So it really only lasts about 2 months. And then there are some very few princes or some very few leaders. Really, that tends to probably be not anyone who was truly of the royal family, although at least one of them is listed as being part of the royal family there. But it's really kind of the lowest of the low of the captains. Now everybody else who was really important, what's already happened to them? Yeah, they've been taken captive. It's one of the 3 waves of captivity that took place. Anybody who was really anybody has already been taken. So you just have a few people left who kind of rise to the top here, and they just can't stand this idea that this Gedaliah is ruling from Mizpah. So there's about 15 of them, actually, it says, that go in and they wipe out Gedaliah and all of the Jews and all of the Chaldeans that are serving with him there. And that really becomes the end of the story of 2 Chronicles and 1 Kings here. So once they kill them all, they know they can't stay there, because what's going to happen? The Babylonians are going to come kill them, right? So where's pretty much the only place left they can run to? Egypt, okay? So those few who are there, they flee and they leave down to Egypt there. And that really is the end of the story of what happens in the land of Israel and Judah. Okay? It's going to be a little bit before people come back and we pick up that story. However, that's not really the end, as we know, of the people of Judah. It's not the end of the Jews. So we find out one final little detail here, that Jehoiachin, remember he had been taken prisoner all the way back to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar. So after being in jail for 37 years, it says, this guy, Amel-Marduk, he is the son of Nebuchadnezzar. The Bible calls him Evil Merodach, just as a different name there, but it means the same thing. It's the son of Nebuchadnezzar. He becomes king in Babylon, and he kind of sees what's going on here, and he actually frees Jehoiachin from the dungeon. However, does he free him to go back home to Jerusalem? No. He frees him and makes him stay there. However, he is given a place of honor. We're told that he has the top seat. His seat is above all the other kings that are there in Babylon, all those that are serving under Nebuchadnezzar. He's given that honor. He's given quite an expense account, it seems like, to be able to have a house and to do those kind of things. It says he eats almost daily at the table of Marduk here. And we presume, it doesn't specifically say, but we presume that he plays a role in keeping the Jews who are in captivity, helping to take care of them, okay? He is giving advice to the king of Babylon. He is one of his top advisors. That's what it means by giving that seat at the top of the other kings. And so he apparently wins favor with Marduk and is able to have that position of influence, even though he's a captive in Babylon there. Okay, any questions before we talk about a little bit of what happens next? Beyond, that's kind of the official end of our material for this class. Yeah. Well, I saw your hand moving. I know I'm totally deaf.
I said the second half of his name is the chief god of Babylon.
Oh, that's right.
Where he's at.
Yeah, that's right. So whenever we talk about Marduk there, remember, and Darrell talked about this, how that Nebuchadnezzar was very devout to Marduk, right? And even was charged early in his career as a prince of Babylon, charged by his father to rebuild the temple of Marduk here. So it's no surprise that he names his son after the god of Babylon there. It's a good point. Okay, so now the people have been taken into captivity. How long is this captivity to last? 70 years, right? We actually know this. Jeremiah chapter 29, verses 10 through 4 reads, "For thus says the Lord, when 70 years are completed in Babylon, I will visit you, and I will fulfill to you my promise and bring you back to this place. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, the plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you." That's kind of a strange phrase there, but it says a lot about the captivity. The entire purpose of this calamity falling on them is because God has plans not for them to suffer, but plans for them to what? To prosper. He has plans not for their evil, even though this is going to be a terrible, terrible time for them during the siege of Jerusalem is one of the most terrible sieges we know about, okay? But yet, all of that terrible stuff was really part of God's plan for their good. How in the world is that? Well, let's see here. Finally, after all of this terrible stuff, you're going to be in Babylon, and after 70 years, finally, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will restore your fortunes and gather you from all the nations and all the places where I have driven you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which I sent you into exile. This is just one final further step that we have seen God do ever since they have taken the land. Remember when they first took the land and Joshua gathered all the people and he said to them, what's going to happen here? If you behave and you follow God, what's going to happen? You're going to prosper, you're going to be a great nation, no one will be able to stand against you, and everything's going to be great. However, if you turn against God and you start to worship all of these other gods and take on their methods of worship and all these abominations of the Baals and the Asherah, and you do all these kind of things, then God is going to get you, and he's not going to let you prosper. He's going to send in people to take you over until finally he will take you away if things get that bad. And that's what we get to here, okay? So just like during the period of Judges, and just throughout the entire divided kingdom here, we see when the people have not behaved, God has sent an oppressor. That oppressor kind of keeps them downtrodden for some years until they realize the only way we're out of this is to do what? To call on God and return to him. So they do. God would raise up a judge, or in the time of the divided kingdom, he would empower the king, and then people would be good again. This time it's just gotten so bad that now instead of just bringing in an oppressor, but the people are going to stay there, what's the final answer? You got to go. You got to go. Yes, sir.
Their main sin was idolatry.
Yes.
And the carrying away into Babylon was to cleanse them of that. Once they came back from that.
Let me stop you. We're going to cover that. I know where you're going, and we're going to talk about that. His comment was that their primary sin was idolatry, which is absolutely right, over and over. In fact, the entire north, the entire time of Israel, every single king, what did we say that they did? They did evil in the sight of the Lord because they followed the sin of the sons of Jeroboam, the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, right? Over and over and over and over and over and over and over. We see that phrase because even when they were worshiping Jehovah, they did it in the form of what? Idolatry, okay? However, what was kind of the sin, and Darrell talked about this a little bit, what was kind of the sin that at the end was just, that was it? God had put up with their idolatry, but finally we get to the end, and how are they treating each other? That's right. That's right. They were treating each other absolutely terribly. The princes were abusing their people. The people were abusing each other, even to the point where they're offering their own children as sacrifices to other gods. And that's really kind of the sin that's going to be the end here. But the purpose is all this is for a purpose, which is to hopefully cleanse them of some of these things, okay? Then, actually, this is a few chapters earlier, but yet it tells the story here. After the 70 years are completed, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans, for their iniquity, declares the Lord, making the land an everlasting waste. So was Babylon doing the will of God by coming in and taking them captive? Yes. But yet, did they do things when all that was happening that were bad? Absolutely. They treated the people terribly. So God's still going to hold them accountable for their sin, even though he used it to accomplish his purpose here, okay? Now, when we talk about it being 70 years here, I think one of the things that is critical is that the people could know this, right? There were lots of prophets who kept coming to them and kept saying these things to them. Jeremiah is the one that perhaps recorded it the best here, but yet we find in Daniel chapter 9, verse 2, we see here, and this is from the Holman Christian Standard Bible. Usually I use the ESV up here, but I just like this wording slightly different here. Daniel is reading from Scripture, and he says, I, Daniel, understood from the books according to the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet that the number of years for the desolation of Jerusalem would be 70. And by the time we get to Daniel chapter 9, what is almost true about that 70 years? It's almost up, right? And so Daniel is starting to prepare the people to come back. And as soon as he realizes this, we find in the book of Daniel there this beautiful prayer that Daniel prays to God, basically doing two things: confessing the sin of the people, praying for the people that hopefully we're going to be done with this sin, but also kind of reminding God, what did you say you were going to do? You said you were going to take us back, okay? And I've read the prophet Jeremiah, and I know that these 70 years are coming to the end, so God, please keep your promise, which of course, has God kept his promises all along? He has. So Daniel just brings it up, keep your promise and take us back, okay? And so that's what we're going to see. Now, what do we know about the captivity and about the people while they were there? To be honest with you, we don't really know very much, okay? We don't know a ton about their daily lives, about how they behaved, what they did while they were there. We're not sure. Daniel tells us some of the stories of what happened to the leadership, okay, but gives us no details about the common people. Likely, it seems, Daniel and the other people made it easier for them, okay? However, there are still some times where difficulties exist. We give the entire example of the fiery furnace where the king of Babylon said, everybody's got to worship me. And we only have a few people that are described in kind of that leadership position there in Babylon about what happens to them. But in reality, all of the Jews would have faced that same issue, right? Of being called to bow down or not to this image. So we don't really know what was going on. How are the people supposed to view captivity? Well, definitely they were supposed to view it as a punishment from God. I mean, after all, that's what all of Jeremiah and Ezekiel are about, is what? Hey, we tried to warn you, but now guess what? It's too late. Even Jeremiah tells them, there's no turning back now, okay? Now you just have to look to the future and how you're going to survive this and how you're going to be part of this remnant. And then, of course, we have a bunch of other warning of prophets like Habakkuk and Zephaniah and the things that they said to them. They're supposed to view this as a time of rest for the land. 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 21 says, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbath, all the days that it lay desolate, it kept Sabbath to fulfill the 70 years. So not only is this a time for the people of Israel and Judah, the Jews, to be going through their period of punishment, their period of purification, it's also time for the land to have rest, okay? For the evil that they have caused to have time to bleed away so that when they come back, they can start again here, okay? 'Cause rest from what? I got ahead of myself. Rest from all the evil that the Jews had done in that land, okay? Well, how were they supposed to act during their time in Babylon? Jeremiah chapter 29 tells us a lot of those things, of what God expected his people to do while they were in captivity. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I am sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease, right? Go there and view this as a time of rest. Don't just go there and mope about and the population dwindles. No, go there and make the absolute best of it. And while you're there, by the way, when you are taken captive, what is it very easy to do about the people that are your captors? Absolutely hate them, right? And want terrible things to happen to them. I mean, that's what I would want to do, right? That's not what God tells them to do, though. He tells them, but seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile and pray to the Lord on its behalf. How hard would that be? Here's this country that has come and taken us captive, moved us hundreds and hundreds of miles we had to walk, and now all of a sudden we're supposed to pray for their welfare? For in its welfare you will find your welfare. For thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, do not let your prophets and your diviners who are among you deceive you, and do not listen to the dreams that they dream, for it is a lie that they are prophesying to you in my name. I did not send them, declares the Lord. What's he referring to here? What were a lot of false prophets trying to say to the people in captivity? Hey, yeah, it's over, right? It's time to go home. Time to rebel. Time to throw off the shackles of our Babylonian overlords, okay? They were trying to say the things that they thought the people wanted to hear. But God is telling them, for 70 years, I don't care what anybody tells you. Guess what? You're staying put. Okay? Now, during this time of captivity, there are a few things that really happen, and we're kind of running out of time, but as we get to these, there are some key prophecies that come about during this time of exile. We have a ton of messianic prophecies, and a lot that I don't have time to get into today, but if you read throughout Jeremiah and Ezekiel, there are just over and over and over messianic prophecies that are made while they are in captivity. Also, there are some historical prophecies about what's going to happen. In Jeremiah and Ezekiel, we have all these claims against the nations. So while Judah has been taken captive, what does God say is going to happen to all those nations that have been kind of terrorizing them? They're also going to get wiped out, right? They're going to finally get their final punishment here, okay? And then, of course, probably the biggest prophecy, the most well-known prophecy that happens during captivity is Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, okay? Of course, we know about Daniel being able to interpret dreams, but Nebuchadnezzar's dream, as we find it in Daniel chapter 2, is probably the most important prophecy that happens during this time. So, of course, we know Nebuchadnezzar's dream is of this great statue with the head of gold, shoulders of silver, the waist of bronze, the legs of iron, and then the feet of iron and clay here. And Daniel gives him an interpretation of this dream, which basically says, you're the gold, and then it's telling what's going to happen for all the nations that are coming here. So just quickly, when you read through this, there's really kind of two interpretations of this kingdom of the dream. There is first and foremost the most literal, which I think is the one that makes the most sense, and I think it fits the Bible story the absolute best. So who do we know is the golden head? It's Nebuchadnezzar, right? Babylon, okay? We know that who comes next? The Persians. So the Medo-Persian Empire, Cyrus, is going to come on here. Following him, the waist of bronze is going to be the Greek Empire. And then the legs of iron, which the iron absolutely describes, the Roman Empire right there, is going to be the legs of iron. And then finally, we have the feet, which are a mix of iron and clay. So it's going to be coming from the iron, but yet somewhat diluted, right? And even potentially some people talk about the 10 toes really being this idea of the Ptolemy and the Seleucid period, because when Rome finally breaks up, all of its generals try to take over, right, and those kind of things. So this is what would seem to most closely fit with the dream, with the prophecy, and it fits in the Bible story, because whenever the stone that is coming, right, would happen after that, what happens right after, during that period of the Ptolemy and the Seleucid part of the Roman Empire? Who comes? Jesus comes during that time. The stone comes, right? Okay. However, I will tell you that if you, probably the most common view held today, if you discuss this with especially people who really want to believe in an earthly kingdom that is going to be established, pretty much everybody agrees with those first four. It has to be Babylon, has to be the Persians, has to be the Greek, and has to be the Roman. However, what many people will say is that the period of the feet is Western culture, okay? That really what took over next after the Roman Empire was this idea of what happened starting in Europe, this Western culture, and then has really spread. And that, by the way, we are still in the period of the feet. Because what are people still expecting to happen? The stone to come, to smash the feet and to smash all of the empires of the world and to form a physical kingdom here. So if you believe that the coming of the Messiah is going to be a physical kingdom, you pretty much have to believe this interpretation of Daniel's dream. Otherwise, the stone already came, which of course, I believe it did. Okay? Now, to get back to your point about some of the benefits of captivity here, when they come back, there are going to be some great things. And I'm going to whip through these. I'm sorry, we're out of time. Finally, no more idolatry, okay? When they come back, they still have a bunch of faults. There's still a lot of problems. However, idolatry is not one of them. In fact, they go so far to even go to the other extreme. In Jesus' time, it's not even okay to have like pictures of plants in your house because that might be taken as what? Maybe kind of homage to the Asherah, okay? It's not even okay to have little idols, little statues of people. Because even though you don't treat it as an idol, it could be looked at as what? An idol. Okay, so they finally learn this lesson. Another benefit is we see the reunification of the Jewish nation. So they are no more separate peoples like in the divided kingdom. In fact, they're even closer than before. Previously, even though they were, even during the kind of the golden age of the United Kingdom, they were one kingdom, but they were still split up into what? Into tribes. But now when they come back, there's no more tribal separation. In fact, to be honest with you, they become one nation, even those who don't return. They refer to them as the lost 10 tribes, okay? Those who are in Egypt and some who stay in Babylon, but yet they're still considered to be part of the nation. Another benefit is the formation of the scribes happens while they are there. Separate from Jerusalem and the temple, it really began this formation of this new order dedicated to writing the law and making copies so it wouldn't be lost. The preservation of Scripture. Boy, I'm not clicking here. Oh. Did you guys close me out back there? The preservation of Scripture is their number one goal. We have all these rabbinical writings that come into place, and we get the true canonization of the Torah happens while they are in captivity here. Of course, the scribes lead to the teaching of the Scriptures, all this compilation, copying, and distribution of the Torah. The Scriptures are much more commonly available. We finally see the true fulfillment of what happened in Deuteronomy, what God told them to do in Deuteronomy 11:9, keep it in front of you all the time. And the priests are no longer required to pass on the oral teachings because for the first time, what do people have? A copy that they can get a hold of here, okay? There's a true desire to study and understand from the fall of Samaria and especially Jerusalem caused the Jews to think, why did God allow this to happen to us? I thought we were his special people. But whenever you read through Scripture, what do you realize? God told them that it was going to happen, okay? And so they start teaching this to their children so it won't happen anymore. I'm sorry, everybody who's waiting. The synagogues are a great thing. And finally, we see them waiting for the Messiah. So really, this is all about prepping for when Jesus is going to come. We see them just waiting and waiting and waiting for the Messiah to come, even though they have this distorted view of the Messiah. However, I will say, as much as we bag on the Jews of Jesus' time for looking for an earthly king, if you just read the Old Testament, what would you be expecting? An earthly king. That's right, okay? All right, thank you so much. And sorry I went over a little bit, but you're used to it by now.